How do I configure the RedoRoutes property in a data guard configuration if I want a cascade standby topology? This is a question that I often get from colleagues and customers. When you configure data guard by default, you have the primary database sending the redo to all the standby databases simultaneously, and whenever you do a switchover, it doesn't change. You will still have the primary sending to all the standbys simultaneously. But maybe I want something different. Maybe I have multiple sites, and I cannot afford having the same synchronous replication to all the standby databases. I want something different, and maybe I want to have something complex with cascaded standbys. So for example, having the primary sending synchronously to two local standbys, and then having a cascaded standby from one standby database to the remote destination. So this is something very, very common. It's a very common use case. And in that case, it's complex to manage manually, because you need to change the destination depending on what's the primary. For example, when red is the primary, I have this topology, but when green becomes the primary, maybe I want to change something. And if I switch over to the other side, I want to have something even different. So it's hard to manage everything by hand. And maybe there are cases like what happens if the green database is not available. I might want to have an alternate destination in case green is not available, and managing this by hand is very complex. But Data Guard comes with the RedoRoutes property that helps configuring all those situations very easily. But it's not easy to understand at the beginning if you are not used to configure RedoRoutes, and that's why I try to explain in this video. So when you want to configure RedoRoutes, you have to start with your topology. So you have to draw your topology on paper, literally. In this case, I have red, that is the primary database, and I want it to send to green synchronously, and then having green cascading to blue asynchronously. And in case green is not available, I want red to send directly to the blue database. Okay? So green is the priority 1, and blue is priority 2 in case green is not available. Okay? But this is just in case red is the primary database. What happens if I have green as the primary or blue as the primary? I need to draw the same topology according to my needs. So imagine that for green, I want to have green send it to red synchronously and to blue asynchronously. And when blue is primary, I want to send to green asynchronously, maybe because blue is remote compared to the other two, and then having green cascaded to red. And if, again, green is not available, maybe I want blue to send asynchronously directly to the red database. Okay, so those are the three topologies that I have when the three databases become the primary. And I need to think of now for each database where each database is sending the redo when, according to what's the current primary. Okay, so I start with the red database. Where does red send the redo? In the first case, when red is the primary, it sends to green synchronously, and if green is not available, it sends to blue asynchronously. And that's the only rule for red, because in the other two cases, when green and blue are the primary databases, red is just receiving, is not sending. Then for green, I have three rules. One rule is when red is the primary. So the rule number 2 in this case, when red is the primary, green sends to blue asynchronously. But when green itself is primary, it sends simultaneously to red synchronously and to blue asynchronously. And then I have another rule for green. That's where when blue is primary. So when blue is primary, green sends to red asynchronously. And then I have the rules for blue. And again, blue is more similar to red. It's always receiving except when blue becomes the primary database. And in that case, blue sends to green asynchronously. And if green is not available, it sends to red asynchronously. So those are my RedoRoutes rules in plain English, and I have to convert them to the RedoRoutes property. And it's quite easy, now that we have the rules written in plain English, it's easy to convert them. Because the behavior of each database, it's in the RedoRoutes property for that database. So the behavior of the red database is edit database red set property redoRoutes. And then I have one rule for each primary database, okay? So for red is just one, as we have seen. Red will send only to green and to blue when red is primary. So in the syntax, on the left side of the column, I have the source of the redo. What's the primary? So when the primary is red, left side of the column, the red database, the database for which I'm modifying the property, will send to green synchronously, priority 1, because by default we want to send there. And if green is not available, as a second choice, priority 2, we send to blue asynchronously. So that is how the syntax works. And it's easy to do the same for the green database, just I will have 3 rules instead of 1. So edit database green set property redoRoutes. Red, when red is primary, send to blue asynchronously. When green itself is primary, send to red synchronously and blue asynchronously without priority, so it will send at the same time. And when blue is primary, green will send to red asynchronously. Okay. So left side of the column, what's the primary? Right side of the column, where to send the stream. And the final for blue, edit database blue set property redoRoutes. Think with me, blue column, when the primary is blue, send to green asynchronous priority 1, and if green is not available, send to red async priority 2. So those are the rules. How can I verify when I set the rules if they are set correctly? I set the rules, I check for the current situation, my primary will be red, so I can see if the redo is modifying, if the redo stream is modifying accordingly. But I can also use Data Guard broker command that is show configuration when primary is. So I can, let's say, fake the output of the broker to match what would be the outcome if I do a switch over to blue or green or red without the need of switching and testing myself, because maybe I cannot do a switch over right now. So show configuration when primary is red, I have red is the primary, then green, then cascading to blue. And I can see that I have a second line for blue database that says alternate of green. That means that if green is not available, red will send directly to blue, and I can see that because green and blue are indented at the same level. So this is correct for the red database. Show configuration when primary is green. Again, I can see that configuration is correct because green sends directly to red and blue. And show configuration when primary is blue. Again, I can check. Blue will send to green, green will cascade to red, and if green is not available, blue will send directly to red. So my configuration is correct, and using this show configuration when primary is, I can check the redoRoutes if they work as I expect. I hope that was useful. Thank you.